Florida Georgia line 835 and a weekly chat with Mike Barrett from Barrett Insurance Agency. We call it good policies. We call it a good reason to tune in and make sense of the world of insurance. Mike joining us as we practice our CDC guidelines remotely. How are you, Mike?
I'm well, sir. How are you?
I'm good. A little cool out there this morning. We had a frost. What'd you guys have in Waterford?
A little frosty.
Yeah, we had that too. Mike,
Yeah.
we've been doing this for quite some time now here, and it seems like there's so much that we talk about that we forget to bring back things that other people may have missed. We spoke, I believe it was a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months ago, before coronavirus all came in on us. We talked about umbrella policies, and those are available for personal consumers out there and commercial. Which one would you like to start with this morning?
Let's start with a personal. Why not? Let's keep it personal for a minute here. So, first and foremost, there's no test at the end unless you want there to be, Jeff. But when it comes to umbrella policies, there's a couple of policies in the world of insurance that I call the most underutilized types of insurance available. One of them being a renter's policy. We've talked about that quite a bit, where it's a really good opportunity for coverage at a really low cost if you're renting. And that's another conversation for another day. But another policy that I find to be very underutilized and widely available is an umbrella policy. And a personal umbrella in particular is something that we'll hit on here. What is a personal umbrella policy? It is a good way, some companies actually call it this, a catastrophic liability policy. Well, what the heck does that mean, right? Well, as you start thinking about the types of insurance you have, so let's say you're a typical person with an auto insurance policy, and let's just say a regular homeowner policy. Let's say there's two vehicles. Let's just keep it easy this morning. There's a husband and wife, two vehicles, and a home. You have assets to protect. And don't forget, on your policies, they all have liability protection on them. And that liability protection is there to prevent you from financial harm should something happen. So let's say you're driving down the road and for any number of reasons you miss the fact that somebody's darting out in the road and you hit them. And you cause either severe injury or even the person perishes as a result of the accident. Boy, is that going to be something that comes back to you pretty heavily. So let's look at the liability coverage you have on your policy. Maybe your auto policy has limits of, I find to be very common, although they're a little low for the umbrella world, but let's say you have a 100,000, 300,000 split limit coverage. That means the most that you're covered for, not the most that the person or their family will get, the most that you are covered for is $100,000 for bodily injury to any one individual. Once that's gone, you're not free. You're not done. If the family and their attorneys start going after you further, then you are going to be personally exposed with your assets, whether that means a judgment or a lien or going after personal accounts. They're going to have the ability to go after you personally because the insurance company has paid their obligated amount that you selected of $100,000. When that's gone, no choices. With a personal umbrella, that's where you start adding catastrophic liability, so that in the event where your underlying policy, such as the auto policy as I described, goes away, now you have up to an additional $1, $2, $3, even as high as $5 million in extra protection to prevent you from financial ruin due to this unexpected and unforeseen circumstance.
That's some pretty hefty backup there. When you think about it. Now, unfortunately, I live in a world, Mike, where with my automobile insurance, I can't afford the rates with the 100 or higher rates of coverage, right? So a lot of us, and I know a lot of folks that are in this, they're down to the 50,000 range as far as damage. It's about all we can afford. So this kind of coverage, the catastrophic liability coverage, is definitely a lifesaver when it comes to that.
It is, and unfortunately for those who have the lower limits of the 50,000, 100,000, or the 100,000, 300,000, in many cases you're not going to be meeting the prerequisite of being eligible for an umbrella policy because the umbrella policy says you need to have X liability limits to be eligible, which normally is, there are some companies that will do the 100,000, 300,000, but most want you to have 250 and 500,000 for the split limit coverage. So, and believe it or not, Jeff, it's not all that expensive. As you start looking at it, if you have a good driving record and the different algorithms that can impact it, but you might be looking at $20 or $30 more a year to have the higher liability limits. So it's always worth looking into. But the liability that's going to extend from the umbrella policy can also address something else that could be a result of what you just discussed, and that is those who have those lower liability limits. Let's make another quick example and say you are driving and you are hit, and it is an at-fault accident from the other person who has now injured you severely in an automobile accident. They have the low liability limits, meaning the most their policy is going to pay out, maybe in this case $50,000. What's that mean for you when you have all these horrific hospital bills, lost time at work, all these things that are occurring to you? That's when your uninsured, underinsured motorist coverage can trigger and kick in. And we'll go back. We'll say, look, hey, let's say you have the $250,000. So the maximum that the at-fault party will pay is $50,000. The maximum that your liability policy will pay is $250,000. So now you've got $300,000 coverage with over $500,000 in medical expenses and all kinds of underlying issues. If you have an umbrella policy, you can also get that same $1 million coverage to protect you for those uninsured motorist claims, because it can be an umbrella of $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, $4 million, $5 million above the uninsured motorist coverage as well. So there's a lot of great beneficial ways to think about how an umbrella can protect you and your family.
Well, since I recently just had to make some adjustments in my insurance since I've traded vehicles out here, mathing it in my head, and I'm not the best math man. Ask anybody that tried to teach me math at LI, okay? But let's just say it's $30 more a year, okay, for the personal umbrella catastrophic liability coverage, right? The difference in my insurance from the $50,000 to $100,000 was, if I remember what the agent said, was $48. So we're still looking at less than $100 a year. So yeah, it is affordable in the event of something like that happens. I see what you mean.
Right. Yep. And don't get me wrong. I was speaking of the difference of what a lower liability versus a higher liability on your auto policy difference would be. When it comes to a personal umbrella policy, even if you are the most basic of basic with maybe one car or one house, you're probably going to be paying about $150 to $200 a year for the umbrella policy by itself. Now, what else does the umbrella policy go above and beyond? Well, the umbrella policy is above and beyond your homeowner liability, which most people have either 100, 300, or 500. So you get the extra selection of coverage of $1 million or more for that. It's above and beyond your auto insurance, your antique autos, your motorhomes, your camper trailers. It's also going to be above and beyond any other type of vehicle you have, such as a golf cart or a boat or a recreational vehicle. It's also going to be above and beyond if you have a home daycare or a bed and breakfast or office space or rentals. I mean, there's a number of things that you could have this umbrella policy be above and beyond. And the thing to consider is the more you have, the more it will cost. So I'll tell you that most households with one house and maybe two cars is probably in the ballpark of $200 or so a year for $1 million in coverage, which is not all that bad if you're able to sustain that.
Right. Well, no, and you mentioned, too, that this would be good for commercial applications as well, but we don't have enough time to delve into that. We could save it for another conversation, but you may have sparked some interest in some of our listeners, so tell them how to get in touch with you, Mike.
Sure. Any questions, thoughts, concerns? Feel free. Give me a call, 748-5224. We are located on Portland Street in St. Johnsbury. You can also find us online. You can get a free home or auto quote and auto quote at our website, thebarrettagency.com. Plus, you can look for us on Facebook, YouTube, and Google. Just look for Barrett Insurance Agency.
And, of course, you guys are, practicing CDC guidelines, and you're seeing folks in person as well on Portland Street.
We are. We have been open since the Tuesday after Labor Day and just practicing the guidelines for social distancing and mask wearing, and it's been going just fine. So we'll keep it up. But we appreciate everyone who has complied. All
right. Well, we appreciate our chats, Mike. You taught us all something this morning. Stay safe, and we'll chat good policies again next week.
Sounds great. Have a good week.
You too, Mike. There it is, this week's edition of Good Policies with Barrett Insurance Agency. We'll go back to the music now with 5 Seconds of Summer.